The Story of Emporium, Chapter 3, The People's City, Part 1. You do understand that it has been nearly 2 years. Why do you worry? Noah asked. Charles hesitated to respond as he peered out the window of Hopeshire Castle. 2 years too long, Charles replied. I'm more concerned that we have not had any reports. We send out scouts and they come back with nothing. It seems that the assailants have just simply vanished. Noah set down the unopened scrolls containing the recent scout reports and walked over to Charles. You see that? He asked, looking out the window with him. The people are happy. They are flourishing and encouraged by the fact that we have constructed this, our home. Young Pearson there, he has truly grown. You did well, Charles. Come now, drink and walk with me down to the front gate to meet the others. That will lift your spirits indeed. As they approached the 2 large wooden doors of the castle exit, the activity of the people across the threshold brought a smile to their faces, as it always did. Crowds of people gathered along the dirt paths of the city, which were lined with wooden homes and shops. Charles and Noah walked through the crowd while shaking the villagers' hands, sharing smiles and enjoying the company of the people. Life within the People's City was fair and simple. Everyone had a job to do, and they knew that their job had to be done in order to survive and finally live the lives they were denied them under Willingham's rule. Charles and Noah had never before seen the people smile like this. The people were truly and honestly happy, which made Charles and Noah happy as well. As Charles and Noah finished mingling with the people, Noah's attention was brought elsewhere. He caught the eye of a woman across the alleyway. Their eyes were locked for mere seconds before Charles spoke. Noah, we must be off now. Noah? Noah looked back at him, breaking away from the woman's stare. Ah, yes, of course. Why delay? He said. Let us get on to the main gate and meet with Philip. He should be arriving any time now. Charles watched as Noah walked off and noted that he seemed nervous. Charles looked in the direction in which Noah had been staring, but saw nothing. They approached the main gate, a towering structure with one way in and one way out, meant for ultimate protection. It stood several stories high, with a single drawbridge lying over a man-made moat that surrounded the city. Standing just off the bridge, Charles and Noah observed their good friend finally arrive with his house behind him, House Conder. Philip stood out from the rest of his group due to his unnatural size. Philip's people funneled across the bridge and into the city, relieved after about a week of travelling from their mountainous settlement. Atop his massive horse, Philip approached Charles and Noah and focused his gaze down on his fellow council members. With his large stature, shaven head, bushy beard and quiet demeanour, he was the most intimidating of the 8 councilmen, making even Charles slightly uncomfortable. Philip nodded to them. Then, after a long pause, he looked ahead and finally spoke. "Gentlemen," he said curtly, and then rode into the city. Noah and Charles glanced at each other. After 2 years of not seeing his fellow men, he has a special way with words, doesn't he? Noah asked. Indeed, replied Charles, as they followed Philip into the city. Given that House Conder was the last to arrive, Noah signalled to the militia atop the tower to raise the drawbridge. As the sun set, the visiting houses were finally settling into their respective living quarters in the city. Some decided to rest, while others attended a small reunion gathering filled with food, laughter, and entertainment. While the people engaged in festivities, the first council met in the newly constructed council chambers, an octagon-shaped building that stood separate from Hopeshire Castle. The purpose of their meeting was to refine, finish, and sign the one document needed to secure the future of the homeland, the document of law. It had been a work in progress over the course of 2 years, and tomorrow the first council would finally ratify it. They each took their seats at the octagonal table, fashioned by Aston Bately himself, and began final revisions to the document. As much as Jonathan of House Wiles wanted to join his kin at the reunion gathering, he and the rest of the council had work to do. Charles stood from his chair and spoke to his brethren. "My friends, tomorrow will be the most important day in the homeland's history. We sign what will be the pathway to our future as a civilization. It will be remembered for years to come as we grow and become something greater for the people. Those who come after us will speak of this night, the night that 8 common folks came together to build a brighter future. Councilman Thomas, if you please," he concluded, signalling to Thomas to read aloud the final draft of the document. After hours of what seemed like unending rewrites and revisions that went on well into the night, the document of law was finished and ready to be signed by the 8 First Council members. The day of ratification had finally arrived, bringing with it the warmth and sunshine of summer. As midday approached, the people gathered around the council chambers. Bishop Reynald began the ceremony by swearing in the new city's delegate, a man who was just a child during the events of the Genesis, who had lived through the raids and the creation of the city, and who had seen firsthand how the first council had led from the front. He looked up to the councilmen, but specially to Councilman Casting, whom he viewed more or less as his own father. "Connor Alos," the bishop said, addressing the man, "do you so swear to protect, guard, and serve the citizens of the people's city?" Connor responded boldly, "I so swear." "Then rise, delegate, over the people's city," Bishop Reynald replied. Connor turned and waved proudly to his friends as they cheered, now holding over them power and responsibility. Noah leaned towards Charles and whispered, "I do think we made a wise decision. He will do well." Charles nodded subtly and turned to Pearson, saying aloud, "Do remember that Delegate Alos is your responsibility now. Even though he is a dear friend of yours, you are charged over him." Pearson acknowledged this with a nod. The people continued to cheer until Charles stepped forward, raising his hand to silence them. He began by congratulating Delegate Alos for his accomplishment and then addressed the people directly. "We, the First Council, have been in talks over the past several years to determine what is the best way to keep our future intact. We came to the conclusion that a series of laws must be created, and created they were. I present to you what will be our most important artifact, the document of law." The crowd had mixed emotions, but most were positive. As Charles continued his address, 2 councilmen carried a table out from the council chambers. "Today, in year 17, we sign the document of law so that we may create a stronger future for those who will come after us." 2 council members brought out the document, finalized and ready for Charles to read it aloud to the people, which he proceeded to do. There were 8 main laws, each of them directly impacting the people's lives. They did not, however, know any different and thought to themselves that this was a good thing, all because the first council told them it was, and so they accepted. And finally, Law 8, Charles continued. The people shall never have one appointed leader ruling over all. Now, let us sign. Charles laid the document on the table, and each First Council member approached in turn to sign it. At long last, the signing was complete, and the document of law was now at the centre of how they would conduct their daily lives moving forward. Charles and Noah brought the document back inside the council chambers and placed it in the centre of the table, where it would remain on display. Pearson stepped out in front of the crowd, which began to cheer in excitement as he was beloved by everyone. "My friends," he exclaimed, "today is truly a special day for our future. Good effort has been put into making this happen by good men. Come, celebrate with us at Hopeshire Castle with food and entertainment. And yes, Lucas," he said, looking down at a man in the crowd, "there will be wine, freshly transported from my settlement's vineyard." The sizable crowd laughed and began to move toward the castle, where the festivities were to be held. It was just after midday, and the castle was filling up with most of the city's population. The castle, in its entirety, was often open to the public, with a few militia posted at certain points within the castle just to keep the peace. Normally, the first 2 floors contained the only accessible halls. Both floors were large and open and were used for any type of occasion. The hall, as it was generally called, was the largest room on the 2nd floor, used for religious events and coronations. The style and layout of the hall rendered it ideal for this type of use. Since the First Council wanted this celebration to be a surprise, they required only the chefs that lived in the castle to prepare the feast, and the council members took care of the music and entertainment. To provide an adequate amount of food, the chefs prepared fox meat, a favourite of most people, as well as sides of goat meat, squid tentacles, and different varieties of fruit. Pearson had found a hobby in winemaking, and only he and a few others had tasted the batches that he had made. He had decided that today's celebration would be the best time to share his wine with others. So he had 40 barrels transported from his settlement's vineyard for the people to enjoy. And enjoy they did. The council also provided fresh water from the nearby river for those who did not wish to partake in Pearson's contribution. Once the people had funneled in and taken their seats, the feast began. Evening set in as the people continued to eat, drink, and enjoy the music played by a few violists and flautists. The tunes were new and refreshing, with their upbeat and positive melodies. There were only a handful of individuals who knew how to play, since Willingham had not allowed music of any kind in his domain. The melody was so good that even Philip was tapping his foot to the beat, all the while maintaining a straight face and drinking his wine. Noah noticed Philip dancing, but his gaze was quickly captured by someone signalling to him from across the room, the same woman he had seen in the market. He casually made his way through the crowd of people and up a flight of stairs into a smaller area where no one was around. They stood face to face. She smiled and attempted to kiss him, but he backed away slightly, saying in a low voice, "Lydia, what are you doing? You know the rules set by the council. It is unsafe for us to be seen together, especially here of all places." Lydia responded quietly, I know. I just needed to be with you. This is a joyous day, and I wanted to enjoy it by being with you." She smiled softly. "I understand that," Noah responded. "This day is not just about you and me. It is about everyone within the homeland. And most importantly, it is about securing our future." Lydia quickly responded, "No, Noah, I was saying this because I'm..." She was cut off by someone speaking over her. A man dressed in light armor behind them, clearly out of breath, interrupted her. "Councilman Birming, sir, I need to speak with you. It is urgent."